we have a roundtable on artificial intelligence, and I'm certain you're very excited for this. And we've got this film to explore the topic. Let's take a look.
Last year, we asked a simple question. Where is innovation heading? The answers varied. The industries differed. One message cut through the noise. We need to be bolder. This year, we went deeper. We turned our focus to the force reshaping everything. Artificial intelligence, not just the hype, not just the headlines. We wanted to understand AI's real role in our work, in our lives, and in our future. So we cast the net wide, global investors, corporate CEOs, AI startup founders. We wanted real-world feedback from the people in the arena. There was almost unanimous agreement that AI will change everything.
This is a game changer.
It's going to be massive. The single most transformative technology of my entire career lifetime.
In one word, huge.
Enormous.
Massive.
Really significant.
A game changer.
Very profound and very, very visible.
Completely transformative. It's going to have a seismic impact on all industries.
And it is going to impact everything we do.
Despite that, many industries, financial services included, are still focused on the same thing: efficiency, the same use cases, the same playbook. And meanwhile, the technology itself is transforming at breakneck speed.
You're using AI now, you just don't realize it.
I think it will emerge a lot faster than people give it credit.
I would say collectively, we should all be trying to go faster.
I don't think it will be this linear anymore. It will be exponential.
You're seeing cyclical changes that would take generations happen much, much faster.
The level of change of technology is going to be so fast that technology is going to be obsolete very quickly.
Technology doesn't wait for anyone.
So why the gap? Why the gap between potential and reality? Partly, it comes down to the fundamentals, corporate incentive structures, an increasingly challenged geopolitical landscape, and raw human inertia. But beneath all of this is a deeper uncertainty. Who is actually responsible for leading this change?
It's got to be a collaboration of a multitude of different types of stakeholders all coming together.
The role of the investor is to understand what that's going to mean for value and how value shifts.
Asset owners can influence companies in sort of positive ways.
The job of any government is to equip its population for the future challenges.
Regulation maybe is the handbrake, and society maybe is the fire brake.
At its heart, it comes down to this. We don't yet have a North Star. When it comes to AI, we don't know where we're aiming to be. How much AI is the right amount? When we talk about regulating it, are we regulating for more or less? Ultimately, there was almost unanimous agreement that this is going to impact everyone, and it's coming fast. How do we prepare our business, our clients, our people? How do we prepare for the future we forgot to plan for?
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you today to talk about such an important topic: artificial intelligence, something that spans industries, continents, and political lines, and something that will impact every one of us here today. To tackle this challenging subject, I'm delighted to be joined by a truly esteemed panel to talk about the role of AI in our lives, in our work, and our future. So perhaps on that note, I could ask you to briefly introduce yourselves first. Samantha.
First of all, thank you for having me here. Very excited. I'm Samantha Ricciardi, and I'm the CEO of Santander Asset Management. And, because otherwise you're going to ask me, I recently became the president of EFAMA at a really interesting time here in Europe.
Congratulations, and a very interesting time to take on that leadership role.
Ulrich Homann, Corporate Vice President and Distinguished Architect at Microsoft, sharing perspective from the front lines of technology. Hey guys, how are you? Those are my fans over there.
Meagen.
Hi, and I'm Meagen Burnett. I'm the CFO of Schroders, and I'm really excited to be part of this panel as we talk through how AI is going to impact us as leaders in the industry.
Brilliant. Before we get into that, I have to ask, Uli, for everybody in the room, what is a distinguished architect?
Well, generally it's an older person that has a bit of gray hair, has done mostly right things, not all wrong things. But all joking aside, it's a title of distinction at Microsoft and in the technology industry that effectively says that you are helping shape either Microsoft's technical direction or the industry's technical direction. And I have the pleasure of doing both in various industry and in various conversations.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us today. So we've heard the intro, we've all heard the noise, not just here, but in our general lives. Let's kick off with the big question. Samantha, how big of an impact is AI really going to have?
So when you and I started talking, and I spent more time thinking about this, I probably in the video, in some bits and pieces there was a piece on this is like the Industrial Revolution. But I think this is more like electricity, because it really is changing everything that we do while still maintaining the human element of what makes us humans. So I know that that's like an interesting combination, but I think electricity is a really good example of what this really means. The other thing is, I think that's probably how I think of things, is whether this is a net positive or not. So I would say this is net positive with challenges. Net positive because without a doubt, used in the right way, this is, aside from going to have an influence on everything that we do, it really will make our lives much easier and better. But it has its challenges because we have to make sure how we use it, but more importantly, really not forget what impact it has on humans and how we're going to look after that. I know we'll spend more time talking about that afterwards, but I think one of the things that is incredibly important is how are we reskilling people and what are the next jobs going to be, because this is having a massive impact on everyone's lives.
Brilliant, agreed. Uli, your view on that?
Well, the way to think about this is the first time that computers think like us, behave like us, talk like us, consume content like us. Meaning you can speak to it, you can send it images, you can send videos to it, and it will effectively process it and reason over it like we do. It makes decisions, it plans and executes without anybody explicitly coding for it, which is really the big difference. And a lot of people have mentioned the word AI, but I think it's really not gone into the brains yet how deep this changes. Now I have computers that say, oh, I can plan a trip to X. People say, oh, that's cool. But now if I can plan a trip to X, what doesn't the system effectively tell you? If Samantha needs a whatever document written for her stock or asset management, the system will know what assets are and it will know how to write a document without anybody programming it. And that's really the big difference. And this starts in knowledge work. This is where we see most of the impact today. Interestingly enough, the beast is eating its own children, meaning software engineering is mostly impacted right now. That's the first barrier. But everything is going to be touched, including asset management, including biology, chemistry, physics. And all of these areas are going to be revolutionized and rethought, where we combine human ingenuity and insights, risk management, judgment, with the capabilities of instant recall and infinite memory. The systems don't forget, and they have access to humanity's knowledge. And if you combine that with an enterprise knowledge, then it gets really, really interesting. And I think it's worth thinking through what that means across the community here within your enterprise, but also the clients you are serving.
Thank you, Uli. And we're going to come on to what that means for financial services in a few minutes. But if before that, Meagen, do you agree?
Absolutely, Ben. I think without a doubt this is transformative and will change absolutely everything we do. The way we engage with each other, the way we engage with data, and the way we run our businesses. My hope I'm an optimist, and on the light side of it, as human race, we've managed to evolve many times. We still exist, and that's a good thing. And I'm hopeful that, with AI, we can coexist, and this concept of a human in the loop is absolutely vitally important, and how we evolve and how we reskill ourselves to focus on the things that make us different, because we will still be different. We do generate unique skills or unique thinking, and the way we engage with people. I hope this will continue.
I think the key thing that I'm taking away from your views there is big change, but potentially quite positive if we're prepared. I guess the evolution of that question, and what a lot of people in the room will be thinking, is how quickly are we going to feel this change? And just to give some context before that, many of us experience a day-to-day world that is somewhat remote from what you described. So you have to click through 17 ad blockers to get to a website. You have to download your PDF, sign it with a wet ink signature, and then fax it over to Meagen to get the contract done. That, for many people, is the day-to-day reality of life. So when we're talking about this massive transformation happening, and that's the practicality, there's a gap in the hype versus the day-to-day. What do you think about that, Uli?
It depends on the industry and, of course, on the processes. But if I look at Microsoft itself, we have now declared an employee being a person, plus its AI components that help the person to do its job. So think about a fully burdened cost. It's not just the person anymore, it's now also compute power and AI capabilities that we associate with every employee. So that's happening right now, and that will change the way we think about people and the group of resources we use to effectively get our job done.
So your point there is, in some places, it's already happening. It's already, we just haven't seen it.
And then in very concrete examples, just to give you two, Microsoft itself is using AI all over the place, obviously, but our consumer support team was able to save $440 million last year by applying $440 million last year, US dollars that is, in the usage of AI, our own AI using supporting our consumer processes. And the fun thing is that most customers like to interact with AI because it's 24/7 available, it's always there, and it answers very politely, and it answers sometimes better than people. And it's obviously something you also don't listen to silly music all day in the waiting loops. So that's one example. The other one is a very cool one, I really like that, where a startup in the state of Washington effectively worked with us and the University of Washington to figure out, to find a new element in chemistry to reduce the amount of lithium you would have to use in a battery. And normally that process, again, I'm not a chemical person, takes about 30 years. Together with AI and their knowledge and quantum-enabled computing, we were able to solve this in 3 months. And we're able to find an element that reduces the amount of lithium by 70%. That was last year, by the way, not this year. So this is something that is happening right now across the board.
Yeah, brilliant. Fully understood, Uli. So I guess the interesting bit then, Samantha, is with a financial services lens on it and a highly regulated industry, how quickly do you see it happening for us?
So I agree with Uli that it's absolutely happening now, and it's happening at an unprecedented pace. I do think that in our industry, it's taken a bit longer, but I really believe that it's important for us to act now. And I'll let Uli talk about all the amazing technological advancements, but I'll talk about things that I think a lot of us can relate to in terms of how do we really make that happen, which is really changing the mindset of it being okay to make mistakes. Because if we don't change that mindset of being able to make mistakes and then changing and rebooting and starting again, we will never get there. I think that is incredibly important for what we do. It took us a while to get comfortable with that, but I would say that we're now pretty comfortable with that. And I think something else that in our industry we take a little bit longer to decide, okay, what are the KPIs? Have we measured the KPIs? Are we now ready with our KPIs? And then, okay, let's go and do it. No, this really needs to be much faster. And once you see a couple of things working and working okay, you really need to take it out and deploy it massively. We can't go at the pace that we used to go at. So I guess in conclusion, what I would say is it's happening now. In our industry, it's taken a bit longer to get there, but we really need to change that mindset to make sure that we're moving fast and faster and that we learn from other industries that aren't necessarily our own. We focused a lot on industries such as logistics, transportation, retail, because that's really where we've seen a huge advancement in it.
Brilliant. So getting the financial services view on this, Meagen, I guess just before I come to you, we hear quite often financial services has inherent advantages. We're already cloud-enabled in some cases. We're already data-prepared in some cases. We've got the transition teams. We've been through transformation before. And then on the other side of that, regulated, challenged industry, cultural challenges around this. What do you think about where financial services stands here?
So Ben, I have to reiterate what Samantha's just said without being a bit of an echo chamber. But if you look at financial services industry, I absolutely think we're behind the game. Compared to what Ulrich's talking about, I think we're behind the game. And that's not unusual. If you look at where we've come from, look at the power we have in our iPhone. You feel super powerful with everything that could be done there, and then you walk into the office, you go back 2 decades, and you're faced with a mainframe. And so we have a lot of work to do.
I can help with that, by the way.
We have a lot of legacy technology, which, as a CFO, it's on my balance sheet, and there's some considerations there. We've got a lot of data, which I know AI can deal with unstructured data, but which data is right? I think we all have challenges in our organizations in terms of that data strategy. And then we do have in the financial services industry, perhaps a bit of what I call collaborative inertia. And that's the ability to work together. We have so many silos. If you think of the front to back of from trading a stock all the way to taking it through a fund and to settlement, the number of intermediaries we have in that, the number of players that have, not inertia, but no reason to change, it's easier not to change. And I think for AI really to transform our industry, we're going to have to work with it, but it's us as humans that are going to have to break those barriers, because AI, is not going to be the person that moves the stock exchange to a T0 settlement cycle and gets us to instant movement of cash. So when cash can move at the pace of AI, we're winning. And I think that's the key, breaking down the silos, and that's where the human element comes back into human and AI moving the industry forward.
When cash can move at the pace of AI, we're winning. Brilliant. Absolutely love that. Uli, before we move on from financial services, you've got a unique vantage point here, because obviously you can look at this agnostic to sector. How do you think we stack up in FS?
Well, again, if you look at AI at the broader lens, FSI is doing fine, because you have been using machine learning and advanced algorithms for a long, long time. And that is part of AI. So you can say, got it already. But obviously what Meagen is talking about is very critical, structural change, really thinking it through. The problem with structural change, it takes for a long time. I don't think we have that time. And again, I come back to something that I started with, which is these computers actually speak human. And so just to give you an example, Microsoft runs one of the largest networks in the world, and we deal with fiber cuts every day, at least 500, 600, something like that. We have redundancy in the system, so it doesn't really matter, but obviously you want these things fixed. Most of our telco partners actually don't have automated processes. We can't actually have an automated system, have data exchange back and forth, which I'm sure you're very well aware of. So what we did is instead of hiring a department of people that deals with these fiber cuts, we built an AI agent that integrates with our structured system, but then sends email to the telco providers, gets emails back, and manages the process as the telco organization does it. So this is AI at use and at scale. The interesting part is twofold. One, we didn't have to increase the department, so there's still 2 people working with the telco partners. And the other side, we learned a couple of things. AI needed to be taught to be nicer, because it was very fact-based and saying you are not really meeting your SLA and blah, blah, blah. So we had to teach it to calm it down a little bit, be nicer. And then the other thing that was interesting is AI was too fast. So the other side was getting suspicious that they were talking to an AI agent, and so we had to slow it down, saying, relax it a second, give it 15 minutes, drink a coffee kind of thing, which it doesn't do, but you know the idea. And so the notion is just don't think structural change, which I love. We need to do that. But also think about what can we do in the interim to use these capabilities, to use unstructured conversations, use voice, send email, and understand the email that comes back, reason over it, and deal with the execution of whatever the next step might be. So just don't think linear, like we have done. I've heard this zero cache thing and straight through processing for a long time. I'm not sure we're there yet. I hope we will get there, but we have other tools that can help.
Brilliant. Look, I'm going to move us on from financial services because something that's come through very clearly here and in the interviews that we did in the build-up to this session is that there's a big transformation coming, and when you aggregate up all of the corporate level transformations, the individual, you've got a society-wide challenge, which really then brings us on to what is the role of government in all of this transformation?
Thanks, Ben. I think both the government and the regulators have a huge role to play here. I think in three bits. I think the first thing is education. You know, Nelson Mandela, who's my ex-president, once said that education is the seed that can change the world. And absolutely, we have to educate ourselves. We have to educate our people, our teams, our executives on what AI is and what the art of the possible is. And I think the governments have a role to play in that. They have a role to use it in terms of education systems, etc. So huge role in education, number one. The second one, which is a bit that worries me a little bit, is data. And I'm not clear in the future whether I'm going to be able to read a news article and know whether that's fact or fiction. And I'm not talking about hallucination, I'm talking about is it actually the truth? And therefore, I think governments have a role to play in data frameworks. You know, when we brought out the internet, there was security standards in and around protocols for the internet. We haven't got that yet. Those guardrails aren't there in terms of how are we going to know that this is actually data that has come from its original source. You know, did Meagen really say that, or did her agent say that? So I think there's something on those government standards that are, or data standards that are really critical. And then last thing, I think we need governments and regulators to really embrace AI as well. You know, poacher turned gamekeeper, why not use AI as a protection tool? Why not use it as your compliance agent? I think your best compliance officer of the future is probably AI.
Brilliant. And Uli, as someone on the front line of this, how do you see the role of government?
Well, Microsoft has been very clear. This has the government is critical. Yep. The regulators are critical. We talked already about regulation, but it has to be something that is in a positive spirit. We can regulate ourselves to death, which is not what we want. We want to be able to figure out how do we make sure that AI delivers the value that we believe it can do, not just for enterprise, but for the society at large. But we also need to stay competitive. I'm talking specifically about Europe, who is great at regulation, so the EU Data Act, AI Act, and so forth are useful, very useful. But again, we need to make sure that they stay positive and that they enable rather than just locking things down. I think that's number one. You already mentioned education. I would couple this with access to the technology. And again, that's where private-public partnerships are super important so that we make sure that the investment frame is there so that Microsoft, Google, Amazon, whoever it might be, can provide the technology in an environment where the technology then can also be used. Again, we're doing this together in partnership with Brussels and the various countries here in Europe, but also across the globe. And the last piece I would say is make sure that society is ready for AI. I was reminded that when the US figured out in the 1907, 1908, that the agriculture, which was at that time 56% of the jobs, something like that, was going away, what did they do? They introduced high school. To your point of education, so that people were getting educated on a new capabilities because they knew that this was going on. Now, what is it? Agriculture has 2% of the jobs in the US, from 56, something like that. And I think education, access to the technology, and preparing schools, universities for this change is going to be critical.
Brilliant. Thank you, Uli. Samantha, bringing this back down to the individual. There's, I suspect, quite a few people in this room that are thinking about their future, their jobs, potentially their children's future, and what this means for them. What words of advice do you have for them?
I think, first of all, and just going back on some data, and Uli will probably have some newer data, is when I think of, I think it was the Goldman Sachs report in 2023 that said that 300 million jobs were going to be changed in the next 5 years. And that probably is lowballing, right? So that is a massive change. As is then, I think it was a WEF report that said 60% of people will have to be reskilled in the next 5 years as well. So that then circles back to everything you've been saying in terms of how important education will be, because it is having a massive impact on everything that we do. So, I think clearly using it and making sure as leaders that we're giving it to everyone within our firms. Also the fact, and we talked about that a bit earlier in terms of ensuring that we are changing the corporate mindset of saying, let's celebrate, let's compensate the people that are using it and are not trying to hide it so that you don't know that they're using it because they might lose their job. So we have to change the incentives to make sure that people are doing it and you're bringing it out. And we have to stop thinking short term because otherwise we just won't see it. So as individuals and as leaders, absolutely education, accessibility, giving it to everyone, but never forgetting I'm going to still go with being empathetic. I think as leaders and as individuals, it is going to be more important than ever to continue being a human and talking to people as humans.
Fantastic. And as we start to wrap up, Uli, a few key words of advice for the audience?
Well, I'm going to use the Nike slogan, just do it. All joking aside, this is really important, as Samantha said, that first of all, you need to lead. Satya, my boss, effectively showcases almost every week how he uses the tools and the technologies. And that, of course, inspires the people to say, oh, okay, this is now not only something that he uses on the side, it's actually his mainline job, how he does things. And I think if you show leadership to your teams, they will effectively follow you and be excited about it. And then the last piece is don't wait. This thing is logarithmic, meaning we have made progress from when GPT-4 shipped. It had, let's say, a college grade education. Now we have models that have a PhD level education, not just for one direction or domain, but for 200 in parallel. And it's going faster and faster. Brilliant. We believe the AI curve will, the compute curve will grow 10,000 times in the next 5 years. And imagine what you can do with an AI system that gets trained on this kind of compute capability. So the time is now, and that's why I'm saying just do it.
Thank you, Uli. And a few keywords.
I'll try and keep it sharp. I mean, the keywords are pretty clear there. I think I'm going to look at this from two angles quickly. As a leader and as a corporate trying to drive our businesses forward, agree, just do it, educate, make sure you're driving it through your organization. But as a mother, I have to be honest, I look at what we've done to society through social media, and you don't have to look far to read the reports on the anxious generation. And I guess we've got a moment in time as leaders and as parents to just step and make sure that we are not just running like moths to a flame and just using this as we please, but that we're thinking through it and using it. You know, human-guided AI is going to be incredible. Unguided, I don't want to think about it.
Thank you, Meagen, and thank you all for joining me. I mean, for me, a fascinating panel, and we've covered a lot of ground. There's clearly a lot of uncertainty, but some positivity and some hope in there. I will leave you all with this. AI will never be less intelligent than it is right now. What are you doing to prepare? Thank you.